It is through profound adversity that we discover the true potentialities of the soul. Without trials, the soul will linger in the comfortable confines of mediocrity, untested, unstirred. Self-realization often demands action. It demands struggle and endurance. It is through suffering that we come to know God. And addiction is a form of suffering. It is a rejection of life itself, a desperate desire to escape, to numb and dull the weight of existence. In addiction, we are hijacked by lower forces, forces which drag us down into the pits of desire, craving, and compulsion. Addiction can have the sense of a kind of possession, a state of being where our agency is compromised, where we think, feel, and act under the overwhelming pull of something that is not us, something that seeks to consume us. And these forces, these addictive forces, they feast on our energy, seducing us with the promise of pleasure and a paradise that does not exist. And when we give in to these forces of temptation, we strengthen the weakest parts of ourselves. And when we are able to resist such forces, we cultivate power. We cultivate authentic sovereignty over who we are. We sharpen the will, our conscious will, that part of us that directs our engagement with reality. And in this world, we will experience many forces which are seeking to shape us, seeking to mold and manipulate our desires. They want to morph us into a particular being. And to do that, they have to shift our conscious will. And some of these forces that shift the will, some of them will nourish the will. They will support you in your sovereignty, whereas some will diminish the will. They will extract energy from you. They will leave you feeling drained, fatigued, deflated. And it is up to us as conscious entities to recognize the difference, to recognize which forces are manipulating our wills and which forces are allowing us that autonomy of self-determination. You see, addiction is an attack on our autonomy. It seduces us into self-destruction. It makes chaos taste sweet and death even sweeter. When life becomes unbearable, addiction will whisper to us, forget, ignore this reality. Become one with me, the addictive object. And it offers to us a kind of an escape from this burdensome reality, a kind of false reality that is structured around the addictive process, that feeling of craving a desire, the satiation of that desire, which eventually dissipates and fuels within us the motivation to recreate the loop over and over and over. And as you reinforce this loop of addiction, you spiral deeper and deeper and deeper. This addictive process, it can seem as though there is no escape. When we sort of feel as though there's no escape, we almost sometimes surrender to it. We surrender to the addiction. We think that, well, this is just who I am. I'm an addict. We assign ourselves the label, the identity of an addict, and we become one with the addiction. And you see, it's strange how in addiction, the oppression is almost self-administered by us. We are the agents almost of our own downfall. And in this downfall, we almost progressively turn away from the beauty of life, the beauty of who we were prior to the addiction. And we feel this deep tendency within ourselves to weep, to weep at this sort of just absence of meaning outside of the addiction. life, it appears kind of drained and dulled of excitement, and our existence becomes this bottomless pit where there is no light and only darkness. And to overcome such darkness is the ultimate initiation. It is a self-imposed trial, a descent into the underworld. And when you look at the world today, is it any wonder why addiction is so rampant? People live lives of quiet desperation, devoid of compassion, drowned in anxiety, driven by stress in their engagements in the world. And when the world is such that joy is fleeting and the beauty is rare to come by, when life itself becomes oppressive, what is left but to escape, even if this escape is into a false paradise, an illusion of freedom? You see, the addict does not run from life, they run from the weight of life. They run from suffering, from the crushing gravity of their own mind. And yet, paradoxically, in seeking freedom, they chain themselves even deeper the more they seek to escape into their coping mechanisms. You know, addiction, it dulls the senses, it dulls your cognition, it drains the world of colour, it flattens sound, it deadens feelings. The obligations of life become unbearable, and the pleasures of life, they lose their sweetness. And when the world appears so bleak, so grey, so devoid of meaning, what else is there to do but escape, to seek a way to forget, to silence all memory, to obliterate all suffering? Even if in this process of obliteration, of escape, you are escaping into a prison, into chains. What are we to do when we are seduced by such forces of addiction? Especially when we consider the honeymoon of addiction, where there is an illusion of peace, where it seems as though you have rectified your inner pain and the mind is empty. You feel the temporary bliss, the temporary pulse of euphoria. The illusion that is set up is the fact that this remedy is temporary. It is notoriously temporary. It almost works. And that is why addiction almost is so powerful of a force. It's because it almost works. It provides such a seductive illusion, a temporary respite ultimately, which is devoid of lasting sustenance. It is easier to sedate oneself with pleasure than to confront the depths of the psyche. This is why so many are lost and so few are found. How then do we transcend such conditions? How then do we heal the scars that are left by this addictive underworld? There are many ways to do this. And the first step is, of course, establishing sovereignty, establishing a clear, unwavering recognition of reality. One must gaze upon their suffering. They must see it for what it is, understand what led them there, and understand why they are the way they are. And healing it requires courage. It requires connection. It requires resilience. Addiction isolates. Recovery reconnects. This is why one must seek support from loved ones, from community, from a force beyond themselves. And most of all, really, they should learn to replace and understand the false paradise of addiction. And they should replace that false paradise with something real, with the reality of what they were doing to themselves and to others. And to heal, one must cultivate love for the self, even when the self is in its broken state. Unconditional love and acceptance is really the foundation of this practice of healing. And it is so rare and scarce today. And yes, it is the most potent force, for bliss, for self-understanding, and for healing. Unconditional love can transform even the deepest wounds, even when it appears as though healing is not possible. One should really not see addiction as a death sentence, but rather as an initiation, as a kind of return from the underworld of one's own psyche. And it is often understood in mythology that the underworld has significant dangers. Many are lost in this world, and many are destroyed by addiction. It does, of course, the process of addiction, as well as the process of initiating into the underworld, it does erode one's identity, it does corrupt time, it does provide a real test of the freedom of the soul. Many are lost there and fail to return to the surface reality. Addiction, it is very similar to this mythic initiation into the underworld, you see. Because addiction, of course, it lures us with temptation. It binds us with compulsion. And it strips away the self. It strips away everything which we thought we once was. And this is a thoroughly devastating initiation. And yet, like the mythology of the initiation into the underworld, there is stories of how one can overcome the forces and return to the surface to integrate the lessons that are gained from this profound hardship. There is a return of the hero from this experience of chaos. But one should understand that in this return, the soul is scarred. There is marks of their initiation, of their strife. And yet through these scars, they do emerge stronger. They do emerge with a kind of wisdom from the initiation, from the direct experience of the underworld, of addiction. Going through the trials of addiction gives you a kind of embodied knowledge, an embodied knowledge of the depths of suffering, because you've been through it yourself. And this is knowledge that you do not read in a book, it is knowledge that you learn through going through it yourself, through truly confronting darkness. And yes, you do gain certain scars, but these scars are not merely wounds, they are proof of survival. They are symbols of a soul that has descended into darkness and emerged transformed. For those who are still trapped in addiction, realize this, that you are not beyond redemption. The descent into the underworld is not the end of the story. If you can cultivate will, if you can cultivate courage and love, you can rise again.